Hey everyone, Cynics here, in the flesh this time, which I know is a rare occasion, but since Inktober is starting, I thought it would be fun to do a quick video just reviewing various sketchbooks. So I got a bunch of sketchbooks here, even more than that, as well as a bunch of pens and things, and I'm just going to be doing a quick overview, shopper's guide, review, whatever you want to call it, going over various Inktober type supplies. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. I will also take a quick moment just to share my tablet setup, which hasn't changed over the years. You can see here I still have the Intuos 2. It's a relic. I think I've had this thing for almost 15 years, pretty much right when I started doing art, but it still works great and I don't feel like it holds me back at all. The main reason I want to show this is because I haven't mentioned it in many years, but it's still helpful to remind people that one of the best ways to use your tablet is to tape a piece of sketchbook paper, whatever your favorite sketchbook paper is, or in this case, it's just a nice hard surface, pretty durable piece of paper. The reason for that is, of course, you get that nice grip to your stylus. You don't feel like you're slipping and sliding around on this plastic surface, and your hand itself also has that nice textury feeling. So that's pretty useful, and I highly recommend trying it out if you haven't before. You can see, oh, I got way too much tape on here. The tape has been building up for a decade now. Just a piece of tape. I gotta clean this thing off. In the previous video where I mentioned this technique, I used to have all sides of the paper taped on, so it was very sturdy all around. But I would find that because of just the different oils in your skin and temperature changes, that you'd sometimes get bubbling and various things, and there was really no point to tape all sides down, so you just tape one side down, just along the bottom. It's easy to get rid of it, rip it off, put on a new one without having to worry too much about taping everywhere, and it's just a lot more durable. It seems to last longer. You don't have to worry about warping and bubbles. So try it out sometime. If you have a normal tablet, it might make your whole experience a lot more comfortable. But anyway, I think we're gonna move on and start reviewing pens first. And of course, there's one important question you want to ask yourself anytime you're buying a sketchbook or a pen.
Tell me, do you bleed?
Well, hopefully the answer is no, but we'll be reviewing them and hoping for the best. Alright, so I'm going to start with basic drawing pens. And there's really two main categories for these. There's ballpoint pens and there's gel tip pens. So I used to swear by gel tip pens. I thought they were the best, and a lot of professionals use them, and here I'll just demonstrate real fast. And for that purposes, I have three different ones here. I have the Copic Multiliner SP, the Sakura Pigma Micron, and a hi-tec-c. These are all very popular among artists. So the hi-tec-c is probably the most delicate one. This one hasn't been used in a while, but you can get really thin, just nice crisp lines, and it's quite good at that. So if you're looking for a gel tip pen, hi-tec-c is pretty good. As for the other two, these ones can come in much bigger sizes, but they're basically the exact same thing. This one's a little bit heavier ink, and you can see it's not quite as smooth as the hi-tec-c. The Copic Multiliner is almost identical in every way to the Sakura Pigma Micron. In fact, Copic makes a product, I think this one might have been out of ink. I didn't pick a good one. I didn't check if they had any ink in them. Well, just pretend it's the same. So Copic makes pretty much the exact same lineup of products as the Sakura Pigma. They come in this silver instead of this little beigey color. But overall, they're almost identical. In my experience from using a ton of them in the past, I think the Copic ones have a little bit higher quality. I like the little nub on the end. It's a little bit sturdier. I know this one's out of ink, so I can't really demonstrate it well. But the ink quality just seemed like 10% better. And the brush pens, if you get the brush pens, they both make the same brand in brush pen. And I felt like the brush nib held up a little better on this one. But for most comparative purposes, they're pretty much identical, so just buy whichever one's cheaper. I guess you'll probably be fine. But if you want a gel pen, I think that the hi-tec-cs are probably the way to go. They're just very comfortable, and the line is just incredibly crisp and smooth. I know you can't see because it's such a tiny thin line, but I can tell you It's a really good line if you're really slow and you're really consistent and you just want really clean lines. Now, the problem I run into personally is that I don't think they flow as well. I don't know. I have mixed opinions on gel tip pens because they're supposed to flow very well, and that's supposed to be the appeal of them. But I find when I draw a long line like that, you can see it pretty much went from having ink to not having ink. And that's when you're going super fast, which is not always how you're going to draw, but there's like little gaps in the line. And I just don't think it's quite up to snuff. So it's very good if you're a methodical, kind of very technical artist. But other than that, I kind of like ballpoints better. So ballpoints are obviously the cheapest thing. You can find them at the bank for free. And they're just very standard. They're very consistent. I should have checked these for ink. This one might not have any ink. Usually you run into this thing with ballpoints where if you don't use them for a while, sometimes they have ink, but maybe it takes a while to come out. I don't know if this one has any ink. Oh well, you all know what a standard ballpoint pen is like. These Bics that you get anywhere. They're not that great, to be honest. The ink kind of gets stuck up really easily, and you can see you're just making a mess of things. So, but that's a standard. You can move on to more artistic ones. I don't know, I just got this one for free with one of these sketchbooks I'll be reviewing. And that's pretty consistent. I like it. Speedy lines. You can see, unlike the gel tip, the ballpoint can make a nice, as fast as you want, evenly consistent line. Much more consistent than most gel tip pens. So for speed, I recommend a ballpoint. This one is okay. And some of these other ones, we have a Zebra Surari. That's another popular brand. This one, it has a very smooth feeling tip. Possibly too smooth. It almost feels like you're just gliding around like on a little piece of glass. Similar to how a tablet feels if you don't have the paper on it. It's almost too glidey. I feel like I'm losing control because it's so glidey. But that's fine. It's pretty good. This is a slightly bigger one. I think this is a 1mm, so that's probably why it feels so glidey. Just other random ones. We got a Pentel one. I don't think I ever liked this one. It didn't work out that well. But in terms of good quality ballpoint pens, you're probably either going to get like a Zebra Surari or my personal favorite, this Uniball Jetstream Sport. I've been going through these like crazy. These are my absolute favorite drawing pen. I get these in a 0.7mm, and the line quality is just always perfect from end to end. You can go as fast as you want, and you can see the line will always be perfectly even, perfectly smooth. It just looks great. The pen is comfortable, has a simple, clicking. I like the clicking. It's very good if you got some fidgety nonsense going on. And I just really like this pen. It feels good in your hand. The ink always runs smooth. But what you should know about most pens I'll be reviewing, and most things in general, the real thing that you're reviewing is not so much the pen itself. This is just a holder. What you want to get, instead of buying like 100 of these, is to buy 100 refill packs. So for this Uniball Jetstream, you can see they have these 0.7mm, and inside these little packages, it just comes with this thing. As you can see, mine's almost empty, but it just has these in there. So you buy these, they look like little hypodermic needles. They come in little individual packages, and you just keep the rest of this stuff the same. And that's always the way to... I just launched that thing across the room. I don't even know where it went. Great. I'm off to a great start. Okay, don't worry. I retrieved the end. Everything's going fine. But anyway, that's just a little tip for you guys that want to make sure you're saving money. Buy the little refills that go inside. Don't buy extra pens, because that'll cost at least twice as much if you're buying a new pen every time. And then you'll just have a bunch of plastic pens everywhere. So make sure you're buying refills, and that goes for all tools we'll be reviewing. But this tool, Uniball Jetstream Sport, I like 0.7mm. It's very comfortable, and it gets the job done. So that's it for drawing pens. Your mileage may vary, but I strongly recommend a good ballpoint pen. The next thing I'll be looking at is just simple pocket-style brush pens. And these come from a lot of different companies, but here you can see is the Copic one, which, like I mentioned, Sakura Pigma also makes one nearly identical to this, except I find that the little nib on the end doesn't hold up as well, but it's pretty much the same. This one, probably out of ink. I have not used these ones in a long time. but it has a very rubbery kind of tip to it. It doesn't really distress itself very much, and the ink flows a little slow for my tastes, I would say. So that one's, it's okay, don't catch me wrong, it doesn't normally look like that, it's normally a much better ink. The next ones you might find might be this one by, I believe this is a Pilot pocket brush. Yeah, I think that's Pilot. And this one is a little better. You can get some nice, you can see this one's newer. Some nice lines. It's getting a little bit of warble on one side though. I don't know what that is. I think the tip just isn't as good. It's like a little wavy thing. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's getting like that wavy feature. I have no idea why. I'm not sure if that's just the way the ink's flowing. You can't avoid it. It just happens sometimes if you're not drawing fast enough. But this is an okay brush pen. I would say okay only because we have this thing, the All-Star, the Grand Superstar, the Pentel pocket brush. And in my opinion, this is above and beyond the best pocket brush you can get. Obviously, if you're super into brush pens, there's much fancier, bigger brush pens, ones where you can squeeze the ink, and really traditional type stuff. But for just a quick pocket brush that you can shove in your pocket and bring with you, this one is absolutely the best. So you can get a nice, super thin line if you want to. Oops, I'm not doing a very good job of highlighting it. Or you can get a nice, thick, heavy line. And you can see I'm not quite getting it. I'm still getting a little warble, but not as much. But this thing, the ink flows so incredibly smooth, and the brush tip has never deformed. I have one that I've been using nonstop for 2 years. It wasn't this one though. And that thing has just been a rock. It has never had any problems with the brush tip. It's still just as good today. I can still get just as thin lines. And I think that's because the ink is so flowy and so liquidy that it never distresses the tip. The tip also is a bit more of a brush than the other ones, which can be a bit rubbery. You can see, I don't know if you can see on camera, but this one can actually spread out a little bit more like a brush tip, whereas the other ones are just made of rubber. Well, not this one, but that first one was very rubbery feeling. It's like a felt tip or something, but this one feels much more brush-like, and I strongly recommend this brand and this type. So if you need a brush pen, Pentel Pocket Brush is definitely the way to go. I will say these things go through ink like crazy, and that's, you know, once again because it flows so smoothly and they just have these little cartridges in there. But it's very, very easy to refill. You just pop that one out, and then you can buy refill packs like these, and as you can see on the back, you just pop them straight in. So once again, it's a necessity that you buy refill packs, because buying one of these on its own can run you like $10, whereas refill packs might run you, you get like, what, 3, 5 in a pack, and they only cost a few bucks. So that's going to keep your budget well under control while still having a very nice brush pen. So strongly recommended. Just make sure you focus on getting refills and not buying extra pens. And here in my current sketchbook, I can show you what the brush pen looks like. This is some examples of some brush pen stuff. You can see you can get a nice mixture of thin little lines and heavier lines. A lot of the stuff you see on my Instagram is done with either brush pen or it's done with ballpoint pens. So you can see here some of the ballpoint pen done with the Jetstream Sport. You get nice clean lines as well, and it's just open to a random page, but nice simple clean lines. It does exactly what you want. So those two tools are the best tools for just quickly drawing with ink. And I will quickly mention the specialty type ink tools such as Sharpies, markers, basically heavy stuff that you use for throwing down a lot of ink. We have Prismacolor markers, we have Copic markers, and we have a Sharpie here. A Sharpie is almost never good to use. Not only do they smell bad, well, most of these smell bad, but usually this thing will bleed. This one is doing a pretty good job at not bleeding, so I can't give a good example, but these things love to bleed. And I guess all of these heavy ones kind of love to bleed, so let's just test that out real fast. We'll be using these to experiment with bleeding later on. You can see though these Prismacolor ones are probably the better ones out of these. Copic are also extremely good though. Copic and Prismacolor. I don't know, I don't really have a favorite between the two. They're both quite nice. I think out of aesthetic appeal, the Copics are a little bit nicer. They feel a little bit fancier. You can always get a Ooh, this one has like a brush tip. So that's quite nice. You can always get refills for this type of stuff. I think the Copics are easier to refill. Someone else that uses them more often might correct me on that. But the Copics are definitely a good choice, as well as the Prismacolor. I would just use whatever is valuable. Oh, one of these guys is bleeding. Look at that. We have some marks. Let's get to the culprit of this. I think it's actually the Copic. Let me double check this. Check that again. That one didn't bleed. Let's try the other end. The other end's more brushy, more ink heavy. Yes, this one is a bleeder. I can tell you that much. So these will both bleed a little bit. And this page is not super thick, but it has held up pretty well. It will hold up well to brush pens. And I should note that brush pens will never bleed on you, even if you go really heavy with the ink. That's in a different spot, just in case you're confused. Let me do it over here. So you can just go heavy, heavy, heavy with the ink, and it usually doesn't bleed. It comes close to bleeding, but as far as ink goes, these Copics and these Prismacolors will definitely require some heavy paper. So don't use Sharpies, they're just not going to be as good quality. And we'll be coming back to those to test our paper. So that's going to do it for our pen review. Now we're going to talk about the main thing, sketchbooks. This sketchbook is actually one that I've been using a lot of. It's a Canson, I guess they just call it Canson Art Book Sketch. I don't know, you can find these everywhere at local art stores, online. It's one of the most easy to find ones, this nice Canson one. And the reason I always enjoyed this one was because this cover is this thick. This is a solid surface that you can always draw on. You can use it as a surface. No matter where you are, you can draw in your lap and you'll have this nice heavy surface. And personally, I'm a big fan of the spiral bound because I like things to lay flat, be compact. You can just draw in your lap when you're out and about in public. Maybe you're sitting on a train or something. You can just sit there with this in your lap. Nice heavy surface. This thing is not going to bend. It's as solid as it can come. So that's a good thing. And I like the paper quality. It's not super thick though. I feel like they've been lessening the quality of thickness over the years. This is about a 96 gram paper, I believe. Let's double check that. Yes, 96 gram, 65 pound. So the 65 pound and 96 gram, that's just telling you how thick this paper is. For the most part, that's what it's telling you. So it's not the thickest, but it's thick enough to hold up to most brush pen use. Brush pens will definitely show through though. You can actually see them on the back. A brush pen will show through, but it will not bleed through. Meanwhile, a Copic will definitely bleed through, and so on. But if you want to use both sides of a page, you might find that this sketchbook series is actually a little too thin for that. I would say when you're looking at sketchbooks, you always want to check the paper weight. I would think anything above like 75 pounds, over 100 grams, anything that comes, maybe 110 grams or more, those are always going to be ones that can hold up pretty well to a brush pen. So you can use your pens, obviously any of them you can use your simple ballpoints, but if you want to use your brush pens, you're going to want something maybe around 110 grams. So let's look at some other sketchbooks real fast. Although I do strongly recommend this one, it's pretty affordable and it's pretty solid all around. I haven't had much trouble with them. Oh, real quick, I do want to mention one other important factor I'll be talking about is the smoothness of the paper. A lot of people have different opinions, but I'm of the opinion that the smoother the paper, the better. I like a super smooth, non-textured finish. This one has a minor texture. It's not going to show up on camera. If I was using like a nice, really smooth, maybe charcoal or something, like a vine charcoal, it would definitely show the texture though. But for most purposes, this is about as close to smooth as is okay for me. I would prefer a little bit smoother, but I can make do with this one. Meanwhile, you can have something like this Strathmore watercolor paper, and this is extremely textured. You can see though, it's extremely heavy, 140 pound paper, 300 gram. So it's quite heavy in it, but personally, I'm not a fan of this texture. The texture is just heavy, and it says watercolor paper and definitely holds up. Nothing bleeds through, even if you're using acrylic and watercolor. My only problem with this is just the texture. It's too dense. It's just super texture, and when I paint, personally, I would prefer to paint on just a perfectly smooth surface. That's why when I went out painting, I started using masonite boards because it's just perfectly smooth, and I think it's much better for painting with. Your opinions may vary, but I recommend doing everything on the smoothest papers you can find. Let's see what else we got. We got another Strathmore mixed media. This one is a little bit smoother, and it's also quite heavy, so this is probably a step in the right direction. But overall, I feel like the quality of the Strathmore ones with their soft, flimsy covers, it never seemed that appealing or professional. So they don't seem very cool to me, but I shouldn't be basing my opinions on that. So let's take a look at some other sketchbooks you can find. So here we have some small ones. I'm going to go over these first. This one is, I don't know what brand this is, Traveler Pocket Journal. I just got a bunch of these, so we'll be reviewing them together. This one has, I can tell you, a ton of pages, but they all seem to be bleached very white. I think that bleached white paper works pretty well with ink. I kind of prefer the slightly toned or non-bleached paper for pencil, but when you're doing ink, I think a nice clean white bleached paper is fine. So it has a ton of paper. It's a little bit reasonably thick. We'll test it out in a moment to see if it actually holds up to our pens, but it seems decent. It's 74 pounds, so that's technically slightly heavier than our 65-pound Canson here. But I do want to add that this one does not have a spiral bound, so it's a little more difficult to get to lay flat. I do feel like this one does a pretty good job. It's pretty good at laying flat, I'll be honest. And the pages feel pretty nice. They have this little rounded edge. The size is good. Let's just test it out. I don't care. Let's see how this actually holds up to some ink. So we'll go in a little bit here. Pretty smooth. Feels good. Feels smooth. Let's test it out. You can see it just vaguely on the back side. I don't know if that'll come. Yeah, you can see it on camera just a little bit. But it's pretty good. Meanwhile, let's try out our Prismacolor, see if that wrecks this or not. Nice, thick, heavy stroke there. And that definitely shows through. It doesn't seem to be bleeding at all. It definitely shows pretty strongly on the opposite side, but I'm not getting much bleed through. So it's about the same as our Canson. And there are definitely a lot of pages, and the value is pretty good. I technically only paid $7 for this one. It was on sale. I think they're regularly probably more like $15. The cover has a nice kind of smooth feeling to it, a little bit rubbery, but I kind of like it. Feels very comfortable. Has a little thing to keep it closed. So overall, not that bad. I'm kind of impressed. Let's go on to our next one though. It's this beautiful one by Lemome, Lemome. And right away, I think this is the best looking sketchbook. Look at this thing. Looks like a Death Note or something. It's got these black pages that just kind of look black from the side. Obviously, it's not black on the inside. But it's just the most stylish. And it feels like this weird, foamy, just smooth. It feels good. You just want to hold this one. It has this lovely texture on it. So extreme bonus points for aesthetic appeal. I will say that right away. And the paper quality, I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but it looks more unbleached. So it has a slight, very slight off-white color to it. Let's see if we can compare it with the other one. Will that show up on camera? Not really, but you can see this one feels slightly warmer than this one. And I can tell you in person, this one is much more kind of cooler feeling than this warm color. So that's nice. I like this. I feel like this is better for, definitely better for pencils. This one feels like it would be great for sketching, and the paper is about as smooth as can be. I feel no texture whatsoever. Compared to the Canson, this thing is just as smooth as a baby's bottom. So let's test it out though with some heavy ink. I will just use it straight away. Let's see if this thing holds up. Just go heavy with it. Who cares? We'll just skip the brush pen, jump right into the one that matters. And ooh, I feel like the paper, it might be a little bit thinner than the other one because it's looking like it could almost bleed, but nonetheless, I don't think it actually bled through at all. But it's definitely showing through quite strongly. Now I'm curious. Let's test out the other one. We'll test out our standard brush pen. Yeah, it definitely shows up more than the Canson. So I'm guessing the paper is slightly smaller, slightly thinner. It's not at all bad though, but it is definitely on the slightly thinner side compared to the Traveler one we just looked at. So if that's an important factor, you might want to consider the other one. This one was also a few dollars more than the Traveler one, and I feel like it's much thinner, much less pages, so you're not quite getting the value for your money, but you are getting beautiful, beautiful aesthetics. So I can tell you this one feels good, it just looks good, and it's very impressive visually. I will probably try to use this one for pencil stuff. I know pencil, that's like that's the last thing you would expect from me, but I'm curious about using pencils, so I'm gonna start using a little bit of pencil, and this is the most beautiful, perfect sketchbook for that. Not the best for Inktober, unless you're just doing ballpoint pen. Let's jump into our full-size sketchbooks, and here we have just a pretty generic seal art. I don't know what it is. This looks like an amateur sketchbook. It looks like student grade stuff, and it was probably the cheapest of all of these. It's got tons of pages in it. It's just crazy amount of value, but it feels very cheap, and it looks pretty cheap, to be honest. So I can tell you that the pages look pretty bleached, although they are quite smooth. That's definitely a plus side. They do feel very smooth, so I would think they're a little smoother than the Canson, actually, so I appreciate smooth pages. Not everyone will, but I have a feeling, I don't know what it says. Oh, it says 120 grams. Is that real? Because this does not feel like 120 grams. This feels like copy paper. Well, let's test it out. So we'll bring in our big heavy brush here, see how it bleeds. And let's see. You know, it didn't bleed through. Well, actually, did it? I think it might have a little. It's definitely a little bit of a bleeder now that I look closely at it. So the paper quality, it feels like slightly higher quality copy paper. It has that bleachy feel, and it's quite smooth, but it's a little bit thicker. I can tell you that much. It's a little bit higher quality than copy paper. So in terms of just something that has a ton of pages, I think this one was only like $7 or something. It was super cheap. Let's see, what else do we got here? I want to bring out my... Let's bring out my normal drawing pen and see how it looks. Just write some words. It feels good though. It feels fine. Sometimes the best art is done with these simple, just cheap pages. You can actually feel the indentation of the ballpoint though on the other side. So that tells me the paper is pretty thin and simple. Because usually you can feel it. It's like Braille over here. So, you know, your mileage definitely will vary on this one. It's not going to hold up as well as the rest. And it's definitely not as pretty as the rest. You're not going to get any girls if you walk into the cafe with this thing. Not like with this vampire badass over here. It's not quite as nice as the Canson, but if you want something that's cheaper and has a ton of pages for you to mess with, you know, you could do worse. Let's move on to our higher tier sketchbooks. These are fancy pants art sketchbooks. This is actually a Moleskine. I believe it's Moleskine Art Plus Sketch is the name. Is it Sketchbook? They actually have two different ones. One's Sketchbook, one's Sketch. This is the slightly nicer one. So it's the Moleskine Art Plus. Don't get a regular Moleskine, the ones that are like little journal diaries, because those have extremely thin paper. This one is actually a thicker paper made for artists, and I can tell you the paper is smooth. It's kind of similar to this other one in terms of just... Actually, no, this one's a lot smoother. Okay, well, it's a slightly smoother version of like the Canson and a slightly more appealing quality. The pages aren't bleached, so they look very nice. And it's got the rounded corners. And let's see, it does lay pretty flat, so that's nice. I forgot to mention that on the other ones, but most of them so far have been reasonably okay at laying flat. I still don't like these bound ones as much as spiral bound, because if you're sitting in a small area like on a little seat, you can't squeeze this into your lap easily. You have to hold it with one hand instead of just being able to flip it around and have a nice drawing surface where you can just use one hand and not have to worry about having to hold this open or hold it from falling off. It's just a little bit more convenient in my opinion, but you may never run into that situation. In which case, this one, it has a decent surface. Feels pretty high quality, I will say. Pretty solid. You can definitely have no problem drawing against this back. Has a little pocket in it, you know, all the fancy Moleskine stuff. The little reward thing. Does anyone actually, you know, give it good reward? I don't know. I'm sure people do. Seems decent. We got to give it the test, though. We got to really test it out. We got to see how it holds out to the badass Prismacolor. So let's check it out. Make a nice thick line there. 2 lines just for good measure. Why not? Let's even make some little bit of drawing with our ballpoint. Give it the full run through. I haven't tested it out yet. Let's give it the brush pen as well. Just all 3. So give that a second. The other thing, I can't believe I forgot to mention, I'm super sad I forgot to mention when I was reviewing these, but this brush pen, the Pentel Pocket Brush that I love, the ink dries very fast. Look at that. It's only been a second and the ink is completely dry. You're not smearing it at all. So that was the other major high point of the Pentel Pocket Brush, especially compared to some of the other brushes where the ink does not dry as quickly. This thing, as well as the jet pen, it dries pretty fast, but this brush pen dries so fast, it's perfect. It's perfect for sketching. Let's take a look at these. So this actually does have a thicker quality paper, this Moleskine. I was worried that it would bleed through, but there's almost no braille from the writing of the ballpoint. The brush pen, just barely visible. And the Prismacolors, definitely no bleed through. A little bit of darkness there and here, but I would say this is just ever so slightly higher quality than the Canson. So paper-wise, this is like a minor improvement from the Canson one, which is my standard baseline. So that's definitely a step up. Functionality-wise, doesn't have the spiral bound, and I feel like the Canson has the functionality beat, but paper-wise, the Moleskine definitely has it in the bag. So a slight improvement on every aspect. Just the looks and appeal, the rounded corners, the soft, warm off-white color, as well as the thickness just being ever so slightly better, and the smoothness as well. So it's like just a slight improvement on everything from the Canson. So that's a nice one. I can see why people love the Moleskines. Just make sure, once again, if you get a Moleskine, don't get the ones that are just journals. Get the ones that actually say Art Plus. And I think they usually say Art Plus Sketchbook. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. Art Plus Sketchbook. And that is quite a nice quality book. It looks very nice on your shelf with the binding and everything. It feels more professional than the Canson. I'll give it that. It's just not quite as utilitarian friendly, but a very good sketchbook all around. The last one I have for you guys is this sketchbook. I only got a slightly smaller one because it was on sale, but this is a Stillman and Byrne Zeta series sketchbook. And the Zeta is extremely thick paper, literally the thickest out of all these. This is like mixed media level, maybe even bigger than mixed media level. And this thing is just the thickest. I feel like this would be the best sketchbook out of all these for doing like gouache studies. You can probably even do oil studies on this because this paper is just a monster. So I wouldn't be surprised to see people gesso these pages, do oil studies, do tons of gouache on them, watercolor, anything you want. It's very similar in presentation to the Canson with this surface. It's practically the same, super durable surface. Just the thickest, and the paper super durable, and I think all around this sketchbook, I don't even have to test it, but I will just to show you guys what's up. I don't have to test it with another page underneath though, but you will see that this probably won't bleed much, if at all. I'm just gonna use the heavy one, and no, you can almost make it out with the light shining through, but on a flat surface. That is the Prismacolor. That is our thickest, heaviest ink, and it does not even show up on the opposite side, just with the light. With the light, you can kind of see it. You can see my finger. But otherwise, man, this thing's a beast. So if you want to do some real heavy inking with Prismacolors and everything, and you want to do it on both sides, you can totally do that with this thing, because this thing's a monster. So this is Stillman and Byrne Zeta series, and if you're looking for something like the Canson, but more super heavy duty, this is definitely the sketchbook to get. So I'm pretty excited to do some painting with this one. I'm not even going to bother doing sketching with this one. It feels like a waste of a giant sheet of paper. I'll just hold off on this one until I want to do some painting. But I will say, let's talk about money a little bit. This thing is expensive. This is like runs you in the $15 to $30 range, I think it was. The bigger sizes definitely get up into the $30 range for these Stillman and Byrne sketchbooks. But nonetheless, that's the most expensive sketchbook. The second most expensive was, of course, the Moleskine, which can also run up to the $20, $30 range. But this one, I think I got on sale for between 15 or 20, which is still on the higher range, I would say, for just casual sketchbooks. But it's quite a nice one for the value, so I can't knock it for that. Utilitarian-wise, not amazing, but just quality-wise, quite impressive. So that's going to set you back like $20. We got these little ones. I think this one was either $10 or $15. This Absolute Beautiful one by Lamome. I don't know if they make a bigger one the size of the other one, but I can tell you, as like a full-size sketchbook, probably wouldn't be as nice because it has this soft, foamy-like cover, which feels beautiful, but probably wouldn't be as structurally great for like a full-size sketchbook. But definitely like that one. And even the Traveler, I only paid $7 for this. Amazing value. It was on sale on Amazon, just the red one. Anytime you go on Amazon, always make sure you check each color because the prices varied wildly. I think the black cover was like a $20 one, whereas like the blue cover was like $12, and the red cover was only $7.50. So that is a great deal. Man, I'm pretty happy with that deal. The quality on this is actually better than I expected it to be. So it's got the bleached white pages, but it still lays flat pretty well. And the quality is pretty good. Once again, our standard base point, though, is our Canson. And you can get these anywhere between $10 and $20. They used to always just be $10. You can get them for $10. But now it seems like the retail price is $20, and you can usually get them on sale at Michael's or something for maybe $10. Maybe on Amazon you can find them for like $12. You just got to get lucky. But these are still a really good, just base point, utilitarian, super just comfortable, thick. The paper quality, not quite as nice though. That's the only downside. Not as thick as it should be. You get the little bleed through. Only when you're using heavy duty stuff though. If you just want something for sketching and doing brush pen or just doing pencil stuff, this thing's great. That's probably my all-around one. If you want the cheaper one, that was also pretty nice. Can't argue with it. The Sela, super value. I didn't really have any complaints, to be honest. I thought I would be able to rip it apart, but it held up pretty well. I don't like perforated pages though, so that's a downside. I don't want pages that are accidentally gonna rip out and leave you with this ugly little nubby part just sitting there. Okay, so that's gonna do it for my review of all these silly sketchbooks. I hope you enjoyed watching. I'm gonna have to do a lot of editing to make sure this video isn't too long because I kept rambling on about each one. But good luck during Inktober, everyone. I'll be trying to do more traditional stuff during Inktober, some traditional inking videos, some different drawing, sketching stuff, and I'll try to upload my Instagram as much as I can. So thank you very much for watching these, and a big shout out to all of my Patreon supporters as well who make these videos possible. So thank you, everyone. I'll see you later.